Okay, welcome everyone to this month's masterclass. On this Saturday, taking your time on a Saturday to come and plug into this issue, to this idea, this concept of leveraging power from the margins. I am very excited about this masterclass and about this particular facilitator of this masterclass, because Miss Christlyn Moore is not only one of my closest friends, and we started law school together, but she is a trailblazer in the Caribbean. And if you all know Stacey Abrams, in the US, she's kind of like that. Someone who came out of nowhere, founded her own political party, took on a two-party system and made incredible waves politically and in the legal fraternity. So I'm very, very honored and excited in this masterclass series to be able to bring more diverse voices into this space of system change, and particularly legal system change. Because we as professionals all around the world, we are each doing our thing, and each of us has something really powerful and profound to share with each other. And I think today's masterclass is going to be incredibly interesting because we have someone who has walked the talk, as I like to say, and you know, I'm not sure everyone will agree on everything that is shared today, but that's good, you know, because that's what these discourses are about, to stretch us and help us to develop our own perspectives and develop in the contribution that we want to make on this planet. And so we're still admitting people. Without further ado, welcome everyone. So good to see Chantal, Denise, Joseph, Lipsa, Lorna, Muthir. What we'd like you to do is this: housekeeping, please, because we need to do it before every masterclass. Please introduce yourselves in the chat, where you're from. Those, I know some of you very well, but others, tell us where you're from and what brings you to the masterclass. During the course of the masterclass, the way we are conducting this particular one, we really want it to be an open dialogue and discourse. And so, you know, Christlyn is going to facilitate, I think, the opening up of dialogue during this masterclass. So it's not going to be a masterclass where the facilitator speaks for a long period of time, and then we have our transition launch, and then we have our Q&A. The way we're doing this one is Chris will explain more. I'm sure we're going to be facilitating Q&A throughout at designated times. If it is not a designated time and you have a question, we're inviting you please to type it into the chat. Okay, type it into the chat, and when we come to the designated Q&A, we're going to be able to do it. All right. Anya, did I forget anything before we start?
No, but at the end of the masterclass, we are going to be sharing the transcript and the recordings to everybody. So if you won't be able to be with us for the whole time, feel free to actually drop off, come back. But know that there's going to be a transcript, the recordings, and some resources that Christlyn is going to be sharing with you. That's it.
Yes.
Welcome, everyone.
Welcome. Okay, so we'll ask everyone to mute your microphones when Chris takes the mic. Yes, Chris, over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you to Future Law for inviting me to participate in this series. And welcome to the guests on this masterclass, leveraging power from the margins towards a more just future. The first thing I would want to start with is, of course, a short discussion about power. If we are going to talk about leveraging power, it is sensible that we unravel the question of power.
1 minute, Chris. Where's the PowerPoint? Do we have the PowerPoint, Anya? Okay. Maybe we should wait for the PowerPoint. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that, Chris.
That's all right. Now, so a short discussion about power. For me, power is that subtle force that causes transformation. It doesn't matter the scale of the transformation. Power is the invisible hand that nudges the scale, that tips the scale, and that can mean access to resources or provide the means to bring about change. Now, power is not to be confused with wealth or fame, because though those imposters sometimes or often accompany power, they are not the same thing as power. They buy access to power, but they ought not to be confused. Now, power to you, the definition of power in your life and the definition of power in my life are different. So power is a subjective matter to individual actors. And even to the same person at different times in their life, the definition of power changes. So, you know, when you're a 13-year-old, power is staying up all night. When you're 28, perhaps power is how much sex you can have while you stay up all night. You're the same person, but what is important, what moves you, what shifts the dynamic changes as your life view changes. In the context of building a just future, the different meanings of power to different persons becomes even more stark. And when you look at building a just future, justice itself is not a singular concept. Justice draws its form from the society that is seeking justice and the history of that society. Power and access can also be redefined or have a different complexion depending on your social, religious, and gender classification. Power to somebody who identifies as a conservative religious person is not the same as somebody who does not identify as religious or perhaps identifies as something different than cisgender. So for you, you must decide what is power, what is justice, and what is a just future in your own context. These concepts are changeable. You must identify where this power is. If you hope to access it, you need to know what door you need to open, and you need to know who currently wields it. You must be honest and clear as to why you want to access power. This is perhaps, for me, the most important question, because the answer to that question will determine your level of commitment to leveraging power. While the pursuit of power for its own sake is legitimate, if the thirst for power is not linked to a cause, you tend to find power will marry with self-destruction. So it is important to find a cause that is bigger than power itself. Now, when you want to converse about leveraging power, accessing power, you have to figure out what is the language of the holder of the resource. So consider the language that power speaks and whether you're in fact speaking the same language. Sometimes the language of power expresses as sex, or it expresses as money. But if you pick at that thread, you may find that the true language is really need or fear or connection. So do not assume that how power presents is the length and breadth of it. It's very much like an iceberg. Much of its context and its subplot remain hidden. Do not assume. Study the subtext and adapt. Now that sounds a little opportunistic, And if it does sound opportunistic to you, then that's a good thing. Because if you are going to leverage the power that you already have, you cannot be shy to recognize and seize opportunities. Now, soft power is a buzzword of the current age. It is now recognized as a leadership style, and it refers to the shaping of preferences through appeal and through attraction. So it does not involve coercion. For my own self, I don't understand the need for the phrase soft power, because it has always been clear to me that power is subtle and deft. But that may be because I live on the margins, and that is how the margins is best able to access and wield power. The margins do not command armies. The margins do not command the corridors of traditional power, but they have an outsized influence, which we argue can be harnessed using the particular skills that are found in abundance at the margins. Now, this chat is about power, leveraging power, and using that leverage to bring about a just future. So if we're going to have that discussion, we should also have a little chat about justice. From my perspective as an inhabitant of a small island, justice means self-government. That's what it means to me, because I am beyond exasperated with a government that is removed from my reality. But of course, central government does not share my view of justice. Central government's view of justice is control. So again, we see repeated, justice, like power, is subjective. As a woman, justice for me means not giving men the legal excuse of provocation when they murder their spouse. But I know that the legislature and many attorneys have not yet awoken to the grotesque, ugly, nonsensical logic of permitting a man to say that a woman said harsh words to him, and because of those words, he murdered her. So again, justice looks different. It looks different for me as a woman than it looks to somebody who has just murdered their wife because she perhaps said to them that her next man was better in bed. So justice is contextual. It is often situational. And while we all are told that justice is blind, justice can also shapeshift. I do not believe for 1 minute that justice is even-handed. I believe that justice is a companion to power, and that power adjusts the scales of justice. Very much like your spouse will adjust your hair or straighten your dress, justice is affected and influenced and colored by power. So in leveraging power, we influence justice. And in influencing justice, we create, or we have an opportunity to create our own ideas of a just future. A just future for me is not the same as a just future for you. Our histories are different. We come to the table from different points. Our vantage point is different. Our needs are different. So how do you avoid these different views of power and these different views of justice? And I do not argue that you should avoid them. It is important to recognize that we come to the table wanting different things, but we access some of the same tools. Now, several years ago, I attended the 18th Commonwealth Law Conference in South Africa. And at that time, there was a raging controversy about the Chief Justice and his failure to appoint a certain white lawyer to South Africa's Constitutional Court. Instead, he appointed a Black woman. The Chief Justice, Mogeng, addressed this matter at the conference, and he reminded the gathering that chauvinism was still present in the legal profession in South Africa. And there was an inclination to provide financial support to those persons that you knew personally. He said that his white compatriots are in top structures, and this trickles down to who they hire and who they brief. He urged that South Africa should serve their country well if they were to develop all of South Africa to support Black practitioners so that there was a pool out of which transformation could happen. Otherwise, he said, the pool of Black practitioners would dry up and South Africa would be left with no option but to go back to its pre-1994 apartheid position. What he was really talking about there was the ability of power, in this case, his power, the power bestowed on him by a post-apartheid constitution, to actually adjust the color of justice. In adjusting the color of justice, it affected the quality of justice. And in doing that, the attempt was, or the intention was, to rebalance the 1962 observations of Nelson Mandela of being a Black man in a white man's court. So again, we see how power is used to shift ideas of justice, to shift the vision of justice, to reclothe justice into a form that is currently acceptable. At the end of the day, I argue that justice is really power rebalancing the scales, and that the scales, whenever they are rebalanced, in whatever direction, somebody is always unhappy. Some group is always unhappy. So because there is no singular concept of justice, the ebb and flow of power is mirrored by the ebb and flow of the concept of justice. Neither are set in stone. And I say this to encourage you again to craft your own ideas about what a just future means to you, coming from your particular background and seeking to rebalance your own legacies and the legacies, disadvantages or advantages of your particular community. This might be a good time, Margaret, to accept questions on the issue of justice and power and the lack of homogeneity in a concept, a pure core concept of both justice and power.
Sure. Monsieur, do you want to jump on and share your thoughts? Because I see you've written in the chat.
Yeah, it's just a quote from Martin Luther King, which I find a really useful sort of anchor to kind of consider the difference between power and justice and this correction, I think, that the corrective force that Christlyn was talking about. But my question, I think, relates to this, what you said was about the self-government where there is removal from my reality. And I think this is happening everywhere, where I see young groups, citizens, that we don't have anymore a common language around justice. So the other side of not having the common language of justice and saying everybody itself is that we begin to disintegrate, fragment, and we have far-right groups coming up together around their own idea of justice. So how do we, if we don't have a common language of justice, how does power work within that place?
I think that is an excellent question. And from where I sit, while a common language is a goal and a laudable one, is it really achievable? It is difficult for us at our various vantage points to find the center without pain. It is difficult for me as a Black woman to find the center with, say, a radical supremacist without pain. And oftentimes, pain is what prevents us from truth. So that in acknowledging a truth, I may have to acknowledge my own culpability in a historic wrong, or perhaps the culpability of my group in a historic wrong. And there is a lot of investment in historic wrongs, investments in a literal sense. And decoupling from those investments not only cause emotional pain, but they cause financial pain. And finance is a significant underpinning of both justice and power, which is why I argue that we can never really find a common idea. What we have been satisfied with over a millennia is accepting what the majority says is justice at that time. And look how well that has worked out for us. We often wait an eon for ideas and opinions surrounding justice to change. By then, we've lost 4 or 5 generations. But that seems to be the pattern of humanity. Now, I'm going to continue with the whole concept of the margins. I live on the margins. And when I say I live on the margins, I mean that I do not inhabit corridors of wealth or power or justice. I live on and have access to or have a view into some of these corridors, but I do not inhabit these places. Like most of the world, we do not inhabit the corridors of power. So I have a professional life. I have a bit of an outsized public life by virtue of having been a member of cabinet and having been a political leader, but I was born on the margins. I am a female in a post-colonial society, still consumed with a morality that the colonizer has long since rejected. This morality, this legacy of morality, has an opinion about my place in this space. In addition to that, I am Black, and I'm dark Black. So my Blackness in a multi-ethnic community, which struggles to find a place for dark-skinned Black people, also places me firmly in another type of margin. I'm an island girl. I am not from a metropolitan country. I am from the global South. I am a member of or a citizen of a twin island republic, but I happen to live on the smaller of the 2 islands. So that in some people's eyes, that makes me automatically small. There are other indicators of the margins of societies, areas that are defined by zip codes, historic injustices, religious dogma that insist on very precise social stratifications that cannot be altered. Some generational baggage as well will present you with a legacy that must be your future and constrains you to a particular margin. And I want to give you an example that shows how subtle it is that we accept marginal positions, or we condemn people to roles that are legacy roles but have nothing to do with a visible reality. So much are we wedded to this idea of the boxes that people ought to inhabit. 25 years ago, I was a newly called attorney at law, and I went to my island to conduct a criminal trial in the High Court. So I was in the halls of the court, dressed in traditional robes and white collars, the dress of my profession, when a woman approached me. She was the mother of a student that went to the same high school that I had gone to several years before, and she knew of me. "Hi," she said. "I am Valerie's mom. You're Christlyn, right?" So I said, "Yes, hi, nice to meet you." She says, your mom is the seamstress, right? So how is school going? You're still in school, huh? How is that going for you?" Now, this woman damn well knew, because she was not blind, that I was not a student, nor was I operating as a student. But in her head, I was constrained to a particular role that was pinned to my mother's occupation. And she could not see, despite what was presented before her, she saw me in no other role than that of student, because that was my place, because of where my mother sat, who she was, what her occupation was. And we do that a lot. Stacey Abrams noted in her book, Minority Leader, that persons who live on the margins, mostly minorities and persons of disadvantaged backgrounds, often bear the burden of being representatives for their whole community or their whole demographic. So individuals on the margins carry with them whatever is the current stigma or dogma or stereotype that is ascribed to their populations. So if you're Asian, perhaps you're supposed to drive badly and be a math whiz. If you're a single mother, you're supposed to be promiscuous and waiting on some kind of government handout. Or if you're poor, then you're supposed to be lazy. Whatever is the stereotype, this is the landscape. This is the primordial soup that you have to navigate in order to leverage power. You cannot pretend that it does not exist. You cannot wish it away. You cannot will it away. You cannot study it away. No amount of degrees will remove it from you. It is part of the landscape, and you have to confront it, navigate it, and adjust for it. So I want us to take a deeper look into what the margins bring to us. The margins tend to be rich numerically. It has an outsized anecdotal database. In the margins of communities, you can always find someone who has a story about something that went right, something that went wrong, something that was tried before, something that was tried several times before by several different people. It is full of anecdotal data. The margins are diverse. There's every type of person, every demographic, every age group, every educational stratification you can find in the margins. To survive this long, the margins have been able to develop resilience, able to develop grit. The margins are full of innovative problem solvers. People are innovating in the margins every day, and they are largely anonymous. Now, when preparing for this talk, I observed some of the comments on my social media page, and in particular, one stood out. And this was a comment asking what was the value of anonymity coming from the margins, and how could anonymity possibly be valuable, far less leverageable. Now, the margins tend not to be primed for success, and there is a very human tendency to try to destroy anything that is an aberration. In this case, an aberration may be someone who wants to be successful. Therein lies the value of invisibility and anonymity, because I can't destroy that I have not seen. Anonymity or invisibility allows the potential business owner, the new NGO, to begin to build a brand, to begin to build a clientele, to beta test the product, to refine ideas, to conduct market research, and to begin to deliver service without presenting as a threat to the establishment so early in the business cycle that you are destroyed before you begin. The same is true of nascent political organizations. If you shoot your shot too soon, the big guns immediately train on you, and you are destroyed before you get a chance to come out the gate. So too with persons who are looking to start NGOs. Now the NGO business is a competitive business in and of itself. And it is easy when you break out the box to be persuaded by persons who never saw you before, to be persuaded that you should stop. So sometimes you implode as opposed to being shut down because you burst into the spotlight too soon. So there is a very real value to anonymity that I suggest ought to be leveraged from the margins. This advantage, the advantage of invisibility, allows you to be much more deliberate in what you do because you don't yet have the pressure of being in the public glare while making important foundation decisions. Now, my goal is not to treat with all the advantages that lay hidden in the margins, but to highlight some, like anonymity, that may not have been framed as a positive, in order to give you some insight as to how you can re-examine and reimagine the landscape that you find yourself in. The other matter I want us to look at when we look at the margins is size. By now you know that when we say margins, we are not describing the corridors of industry and power, but the regular Joe and the regular Johns who are going about the drudgery of ordinary life. The communities with their churches and their mosques and their clubs and their schools, the drudgery of a regular 8 to 4, or the uncertainty of no job at all in a community that is either undesirable or just meh. Countless people live in these circumstances, fraught with the day-to-day challenges of poverty, social immobility, political inactivity, sexism, racism, misogyny. Often the challenges of the community and the sheer numbers of its inhabitants who live and die in this drone can be overwhelming. It can cause you to shut down and to despair. Our challenge is to look closer at the numerical value of the margin and to see it as the powerhouse and the political driver that it in fact is. Now the margins are the equivalent of the 99%. Sheer power, sheer size, not marginal by any means when it comes to being a consumer or a supporter. Outsized in terms of its ability to create real and permanent change. You only have to look at the numbers behind any recent social movement to see what I mean. Because social movement, social activism has been driven by marginal communities. Communities who traditionally have been shot and hanged, who have been kept out of the banking system, kept out of the housing system, kept out of the political system. These are the communities that have leveraged their power. And you see more and more those communities coming out. The importance of recognizing the size of the margin lay in reminding yourself that you are far from alone. It's not just you, it's not just your organization, it's not just your group. You are part of an outsized group that you have not accessed. And if you don't understand that, it means that you don't understand your mission or your place in that mission. Now, you are really part of a machine. That is what the margin is. It's a machine, and you hold power to a couple of the moving parts. Your challenge is to identify the part that you have access to and to mobilize and shift and oil that part. The other matter that the margins are good at is experience. Every possible iteration of experience can be found in these communities. There is no better economist than the mother who works a small job to support her large family. There is no better engineer than the craftsman who has to make his own tools. Degrees be damned. While the margins are not the corridors of power, they are the meccas of innovation and industry. And if you inhabit this space, I urge you to look critically at what your true skills are. Look behind your degrees and your certificates and your GCSE subjects and your CXE subjects, because those things only indicate that you are a good learner. They do not indicate what your actual skills are. Now, years ago, an elderly lawyer from Iowa once told me that if war ever broke out, nobody was calling for a lawyer. People would be wanting persons with actual skills, people who could build things, who could hunt, and who could cook. And at that time, you know, I readily agreed with him. But as time has gone on, I have re-examined what I actually do and what my actual skills are. And my skill is not reflected by my law degree. So here are some of my skills. I am really good at stripping a problem down to its component parts and mapping an inexpensive solution to that problem. This is because I was a child of poverty, and it was necessary to find a fast solution that worked for as many people as possible with as little cost as possible. Another one of my skills is that I'm not afraid to take on ever bigger challenges, which on paper I may have absolutely no expertise in, but I have had the early experience of being trusted to find a solution, and I've developed successes in that area. And so now I am confident that short of curing cancer, I can do anything. Another of my skills, and some of my friends are on this platform, and they may want to agree in private, though not in public, is that I am a bit of an asshole. And I've come to realize that this is a skill and an asset. After I demitted office as Minister of Justice in 2013, I was asked by a land acquisition agency to manage their independent contractors. These contractors were responsible for acquiring large tracts of land for the state to build a new highway. However, their delivery rate was very poor, and the effect was not just that there was delay, there were penalty costs that had to be paid to the foreign road building contractor in hard currency at an eye-watering daily rate. So my job was to get the independent contractors to get land faster. So I went about it by assembling a team, my own team, and we set about visiting each contractor to get an idea of what the challenges that they were facing were and to determine how best we could unclog their plumbing. After one of these meetings, my team and I got back in the car, and one team member, who I had always considered a mentor, said to me, "Christlyn, I don't like your style. I didn't like your tone in that meeting, and I think you came off like a bitch. I think you would catch more flies with honey, and you should dial it back and talk softly to these people, and you should definitely smile more." Let me tell you, it sucked the air out of me. I was completely gutted. Here was my mentor telling me basically that I was unsuited for a job that I had been hired to do. Now, mind you, I had no memory of the meeting being anything less than cordial and fact-finding, so I was even more confused. But right there and then, I had an epiphany. Assuming she was right, the client already knew that I was an asshole. This was exactly why I was hired. The client, faced with losing over $100,000 US a day for each section of roadway not delivered, decided, I'm not going to hire Kofi Annan. I don't have time for slow diplomacy that cost a lot and took a long time. What they wanted was a more direct management style, and someone who would understand the urgency of the task, its challenges, and deliver whatever it took. Ultimately, my 8-month contract was extended for 2 years, And over that period, my team and I delivered more land than all 5 independent contractors combined. I cite that example to you to say, look behind what your qualifications say you are. And this especially is for people or those persons in this chat who do not have formal qualifications. Take a moment to look at the things you really do well. Focus on your successes and drill down to determine what actually brought that success about. When you identify that, you identify the skill that you are going to now deliberately grow and deliberately sell in an effort to gain momentum and build a group. It is critical for you to know what you are bringing to the table, your unique strengths and perspectives. You have to be able to articulate that skill and to rejig it to suit the occasion if you want to change where you sit. Do not dwell on the legacies of your station. Look inwards. Be critical. Ask a trusted friend, are your strengths solid strengths? Are your weaknesses really weakness? And do they in fact have value? At this point, I want to go on to deal with time, which is another issue that we miss in the margins. I can pause here for questions if there are any. Margaret?
Yeah, Chris, there is one from Monsieur where he asks, can you give examples of how you use these skills to leverage power from the margins in your context?
Sure. So let us go back to me being an asshole. I say that because, you know, women are expected to be a little more dulcet, a little less direct. We are not expected to be nakedly ambitious or to be forward leaders. It's okay if we are in the second or third tier of leadership, but upfront it causes a problem. And if you are upfront and assertive, then you get labeled a bitch or, you know, lacking a sense of humor and so on. So it took me a while to recognize that people rely on my direct approach. Clients come to my office because they want a direct, fair, clear, concise, honest approach. So that what I have found, what I have developed as a result of recognizing that I am direct and seeing it as a strength, I actively sell it. So I say to clients who are, or when I am, let's say, looking for business, I say, we give you, what you buy from us is our unvarnished opinion about your matter. So the client knows immediately that he is unlikely to get his balls rubbed or his head stroked because we want to keep the client. What we want the client to know is that whether your matter is destined to fail or likely to succeed, you're going to hear it from us. This gives confidence. It gives the client confidence that we are willing to say you have no case, because saying you have no case, we earn no money. It gives the client confidence to trust us in other spheres, not necessarily legal. I have had legal clients who have come back later on for life advice. So I have found that once you can name your particular skill, you can sell it. Another example, I have a friend who has transitioned out of law. She recently retired and is struggling to find her feet. And she's saying to me, you know, I don't want to do law anymore, but I don't know what else I can do. I've done this for so long. And I said to her, but you are You've taught me what it means to be a mother. She's like, but that's not a sellable skill. I said, but I disagree. She is such an amazing parent, so thoughtful, so caring, so meticulous, that I thought that that was an experience she could share via a blog. She can easily transition into blogging about motherhood, about raising children, about raising teenagers, and who knows where that will lead. So we have innate skills, but unless we grasp them and present them first to ourselves, then we can't present them to others. So I will move on to the another facet of life in emergence that perhaps we don't take enough time to look at, and that is time. You have presumably come to this masterclass because you are amassing an arsenal of tools to take the next step. Maybe what I am saying you've heard before, and nothing has shifted for you, and time continues to pass. Maybe you're in the same place, doing the same thing, failing the same way. So let's talk about time. I warned in the blurb to the masterclass that this was not a class on how to go viral. I have no particular insight on that. But what I do know is that regardless of how you came into power, it took an unseen amount of time planning it. Power, as I said before, is like an iceberg. Most of it is hidden from view. What are you doing as you are waiting to amass this army? You need to plan, you need to work, and you need to work the plan. Even if you are born into power, power is a bit of a relay. If you've never held power, you can't be in a hurry to seize it unless you've spent serious time in preparation to hold it and to wield it. Another anecdote. I attended I think the centennial of the Treaty of Chagaramas. And I was fortunate enough to sit with the Prime Minister of Grenada. It was a new government. They had been in opposition before that and in government before that. And he said to me, he said when they first got into government, they were of course very excited, but they didn't know where anything was. They didn't understand how the public service ran. They didn't understand the minefields that had been planted by their predecessors to ensure their failure. They had grabbed government, but they were not equipped to hold government. So at the very next opportunity, they lost. He was talking to me at the next iteration where they were well seated. And he said to me, we are comfortable now. That to me is a powerful lesson in the fact that getting power is not enough. If you are not equipped, as quickly as you've seized it, you will lose it. So it helps to have a fluid concept of time and not to be constrained by conventional timelines. You know, I need to have my degree by 23, have my first child by 32, buy my house at 45, do my PhD at 50. Those timelines mean nothing. Nelson Mandela was in prison for 27 years. What did he do at that time? He used the time to engage the enemy, to understand the enemy, to inspire the margin, and to plan to hold, keep, and wield power. It's not just enough to get it. You have to keep it. History is replete with surprise coups, whose victors didn't last long enough to govern a week. Around the global south, we hiccup from election to election, not creating any lasting legacy or any bipartisan legacy, but we busy ourselves with undoing the work of our predecessors because we have a personal view of time. not a dynastic view of time. If you are thinking about seizing power, have a dynastic view of time. Reconcile yourself to the fact that you may be planting a tree that you will never sit under. If you can reconcile to the reality that you may not enjoy the fruits of your power, you will relax into building a proper foundation. Now, can we talk a little about mobilizing power from the margins? Social media is a good tool, of course, to start with in this regard, and it has been used to mobilize people time and time again by easily permitting you to cultivate a group of like-minded individuals. You can use, your small social media group first as a sounding board to beta test your passion, to receive feedback, to refine your ideas. The beauty of social media is that it's cheap. It's relatively cheap, it's easy to use, it's comfortable, and it's commitment-free. Having identified your target, that is to say, where you want to go, what you want to achieve, you now need to design a roadmap to get there. Now, I stick a pin there. I mentioned social media because it's easy and because that's where we are. But of course, there are many different ways to mobilize a base. Social media is perhaps the easiest, but there are many others. Now, having identified your target, that is to say where you want to go, what you want to achieve, we need to design a map. Most people design a very linear map. They say, I am here and I want to get here. I want to be a policeman. What is in between? Okay, the qualifications. So they go from where I am, the qualifications I need to get, the end result, in our example, policeman. Such a lean map does not allow you to access or leverage power. Instead of it being a line between 2 points, your map should be a circle with different, which is the goal, with different points of entry to that goal. Several routes to the same destination. So if we stick with our policeman example, we can't just say we want to be a policeman. We have to drill down. Why? Why do we want to be a policeman? If one of the reasons you want to be a policeman is, let's say, to ensure that your community is safe, then while you're on your linear trajectory, which is getting the qualifications to secure the job, you might consider forming a neighborhood watch. You might consider putting out flyers to the community with security pointers and important numbers. You might consider taking some judo classes or some other type of, protection class. You might consider joining a nonprofit that deals with safe communities. You might consider volunteering at a victim center or the rape crisis center, or manning the phone lines for these organizations. It means that at the end of your linear journey, you would have amassed such a comprehensive body of not only information, but contacts that you are no longer simply a policeman. You have now, because of how you use that time, you have now moved yourself into the realm of security expert and chief neighborhood watch or chief consultant for domestic security issues in your community. You have to use the time much more creatively than simply staggering from one qualification to the next on the route to either job number 1 or job number 2 or job number 3. Leveraging power is about recognizing the ripples that lie buried on the way to the destination and using all these concentric opportunities to prepare for what you believe to be the end game. By taking this approach, which is to deconstruct the goal. Why do I want to be a policeman? Deconstruct the goal and find where it intersects with the various community goals. You will be able to see more clearly how you can start to build a base or a following or a clientele. We all know the maxim that work expands to fill the time. So whether you do one task or 12, the time taken is going to be the same. People who leverage power make the most of their time, pursuing the goal from multiple angles, all the while steadily growing their community. The idea of following the ripples works for individuals as well as businesses, as well as political organizations. At its core, it is the reality of relationship building and partnering. That is what following the ripples is all about. So at this point, before I move into relationship building, Margaret and Anya, if there are any questions, perhaps I could take them at this point.
How are we going, everyone? Are there any questions on what Christlyn's been saying? I just want to say that example about the policeman wanting to become a policeman and shifting from a linear to a concentric approach to leveraging your power, I think was brilliant, Chris. I really enjoyed that. Very profound.
Well, and Margaret, when we look at our own businesses, that is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
You really need to identify the why. And I remember talking to you years ago, and you articulating your passion about the managing of financial affairs at a governmental level. How are our resources being acquired, and what are the processes involved in that? And until you find what drives you, until you understand the why, you are not able to build a proper map. More than that, you pursue an aim for its sake, and that almost always ends in destruction, because you tend to have no frame for the passion. It means that you could be doing this with nothing tethering you to any kind of personal or public morality. And that, of course, we know is a recipe for all sorts of disasters. So I'll move on at this point to...
No, wait. I think Monsieur has his hand up. Monsieur.
Oh yeah, thanks. Sorry, it's just, I know you said about being very direct, so I'm going to try to do this. So I just saw an ask, so what was your goal, like you wanted to reach? Because I just read you resigned from the head of the party last year. So does it mean that you didn't achieve your goal, or did you achieve your goal in the end?
That's a really good one. Jeez, what's up with you this morning, boy? I was forced to take a critical look at what my landscape was and whether the route that I had taken to the goal was optimal. So the goal to me was to provide a voice, has always been to provide a voice for my small community. As I said before, I live in a twin island republic. I am from the smaller island, and we crave self-government. We tend to be left behind in policy making and so on. And so my goal for political engagement was always to lend my voice, to amplify the voice of the 60,000. And the route that I chose to do that was political engagement, forming a political party and using that as the platform. I had an opportunity since 2018 to look critically as to that route. And when I considered it, I considered that as a route, it was formulaic. What I was in fact doing was the equivalent of being a policeman by getting qualifications. So that the reach was not as impactful. The other matter that I had not considered was the constraints of the environment. I did not give enough thought to that. And I did not factor, or I did not adjust for the weight of being female and how that may have been an obstacle in the path that I chose. So having recognized that and admitted it, I decided that I would practice what I preached and not do linear, although when you do it at a particular scale, it doesn't look linear, but it is. And really go back to the first principles, which is, why do you want to do this? What it is you want to achieve? And how are the many ways that you can approach this issue? So that led to resignation. Because to do otherwise would be to simply stay on that linear path, which would not give me and the organization the impact that the people of that island deserve. Now, on to relationship building and partnering. There is an African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. During my time in cabinet, I observed a cabinet member who was a member of an established religious organization. This member found himself in a cabinet of diverse ethnicities and religions, but he was careful to attend no religious function outside his own sect. Now, this might be normal in the global north, but when you come from a cosmopolitan island, an island a set of islands that market themselves as cosmopolitan, multi-religious, multi-ethnic, it is unheard of for a member of a religious organization, particularly at a governmental level, not to support his colleagues. We are known for our streets where churches lend their premises out to imams so that they can have services. We are known for our streets where there are mosques next to temples, next to churches. We are known for the Anglican school being in the Catholic compound and vice versa. So this was huge that this person would stand on his religiosity and his sectoral position and not support or be seen to support colleagues in a cabinet. So he attended no cultural celebrations that had religious overtones of another religion. His religious hours, he strictly observed them, and he attended no functions when his religious hours were in observance. He was a vocal advocate for his own group, but he didn't break a sweat when anybody else brought their group's concerns for consideration. Suffice it to say, he built no lasting relationships and attracted no personal support because he chose to go it alone. Even when his very job, the very environment of his occupation screamed that he should do otherwise, that he should collaborate, that he should reach across the aisle, that he should reach out, it wasn't even across the aisle. He should reach across the table to his friends and collaborate. He never shifted. The result was that he was isolated. And when trouble came, as it usually does, he was almost totally alone. Building community is a continuous endeavor. It is like tending to a garden. You plant, you prune, you water, you tend, you fertilize, you praise, you scold, you reap, and then you do it all again. The rules for community building include understanding what you bring to the community as well as what you want from the community. Have you ever met someone who desperately wanted to be in a relationship and had a list of all the things they wanted out of the relationship, but had no notion that they needed to contribute anything other than to show up. That is not a way to build either a relationship or a community. Scores of people seek to build community or relationships having only answered the questions of what they want, giving no thought at all to what they bring. And I use the term community interchangeably with relationship because it's the same thing. It has nothing to do with numerical size of the interaction, but rather the quality or the depth of the interaction. And at every juncture, your value to the endeavor, your value to the organization, your value to the movement must be lived. You cannot rely on that one good thing you did 10 years ago, or that one good speech you made last week. Proving your worth to this community or to the movement is a living, breathing, continuous organism. I came into the profession of law 25 years ago when the profession was much smaller and there was a dying notion of mentorship. This may have been a holdover from the days of pupillage. And I was fortunate enough to have been encouraged by people who I didn't know at all, but who were invested in my success. It is only within the last few days, as I sat to prepare for this masterclass, that I understood that these people were not writing on a blank slate. They were in fact shaping material that had already been somewhat tempered. As a result, I now mentor young attorneys, particularly young Black female attorneys. But you can't support someone who brings nothing to the table. It is like feeding a hole. So that if you are poised at the stage of change, you are at the starting block of change, and you want support to catapult you out of the blocks. It is not good enough that you've shown up. It is not good enough that you have a bright idea. It is not good enough that you exist or you're beautiful or you are charming. If that's all you have to offer, your idea, your product, your movement must contribute to the community in a real way and must have some hallmarks of sustainability and achievability. You have to be able to motivate and to inspire by what you bring, the skills you bring, the contribution you bring, the other members of the team that are there because of you. Now, if you want to go far together, you also need to make wise choices about partnering, as these choices will affect you for the rest of the journey and perhaps even after you've stopped the race. In some communities, your choice cannot be undone without reputational harm. In facing such a dilemma, if you have decided or if it has been revealed that you have made a poor choice, the narrative of your uncoupling is important. If you have no control over the narrative, then you must be prepared to work over time to quiet and supplant the community's narrative with one of your own. Now, Margaret, is this where we want to take the break before we get to our horsemen, or will we continue?
I say we do the horseman and then we take the transition launch and then we come back and have a great discussion on all that you said, open for everyone.
Lovely. So I want us to talk now about the 3 effing horsemen of the apocalypse. What keeps many of us from failing to mobilize our talents in the margin is what I call the 3 effing horsemen of the apocalypse: fear, failure, and finance. These demons live in the margins of all communities, and they play a great role in power management. So let's talk about fear. Fear is the first F. Roles ascribed to you by your family, your community, your school, or your church can be hard to break. Attempts to chart a different course may come with consequences, including criticism, ostracization, ridicule, doubt, anger, because members of marginal communities are expected both by the community and the outside world, as we said before, to be faithful to its stereotypes. So if you come from a long line of ne'er-do-wells, you are expected to be a ne'er-do-well, and your whole family unit might well be concerned if you are not joining them on whatever block that the entire community or family, hangs out at. Sometimes it is very, very difficult to persuade members of your community that success is your portion. They are more likely to persuade you that failure is your destiny. I used to have a younger sister. Her name was Dawn. She was my father, Desmond's firstborn, with his wife, who's my stepmother. And she was about 6 years younger than me. While we were in high school, Dawn ran away from home. Now we live on a small island, 60,000 people. So word soon got out that Desmond's daughter had run away. People swarmed my mother's house out of concern and some curiosity, of course. Why? Because I was the product of a single mother. I was fatherless. My mother was on the bottom rung of society. So I was expected to run away from home, not Dawn. The margins, the point being that the margins can map out your path to nowhere. The margins can map your criminality, the timing of your offspring, or when you drop out of school. When the expectations for your future are low, having high ambitions for yourself is a lonely place, and it is far easier to take the path already carved out for you. It takes real courage to admit that your community may not expect your success and may actually be conspiring to your failure. It takes wild courage to work against this view. Frank Herbert's book, Dune, taught me the litany against fear at a critical moment in my teenage life. I still use it today when I face monumental change. The litany compels me to run towards the source of my fear rather than to run away. Very much like first responders run into a burning building. I think I may have the litany. It says, I must not fear. Fear is a mind killer. Fear is the death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear and permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it is gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Fear needs to be your friend. If you are going to leverage power from a place where power is not usually accessed, you must make fear your friend. The more frightened you are, the broader you should smile. Because ultimately, fear keeps us from success. Fear is a barrier to leveraging power. It is a barrier to success and to continuity and to growth. You have to make friends with fear. The second effing horseman, failure. In the margins, we have been conditioned to equate ourselves with our failed endeavors. So that when a child gets an F in an exam, he is the embodiment of that F. When a business venture flops, the owner is a flop. Yet this is not true in the corridors of hard power, where businesses are won and lost at the toss of a coin, but the owners fail upwards and fail forwards into even more lucrative endeavors. According to Rolling Stone magazine of May 8th, 2019, Donald Trump lost more money than anybody in America between 1985 and 1994, a staggering $1.17 billion. Yet he managed to fail forward into the most powerful job in the free world. I used to be in a relationship where I was constantly reminded of every venture that I tried that didn't work. And my response is that people who do nothing fail at nothing. The point is that failure is the trophy of people who act. It is the trophy, it is the medal of people who try, of people who venture. Failure is a proving ground like no other, and a more powerful teacher you could not find. The margins are full of so-called failures, which means that it is full of people who know what should not be done. These people are the jet fuel to your business, to your movement, to your organization. So your neighbor has a failed catering business and you had a failed bakery business. Well, you both now are very aware of the pitfalls of the food service industry. Together, you are the heart of a food cooperative. Find your fellow failures. You know, I have been going on now for a bit, and I'm trusting that you understand that by being in the margins, you already have a constituency. You already have a market or a base whose challenges you know intimately because you live it. And you can move this market and this constituency and this base if you only work. Now for the final effing horseman, finance. Life in the margins normally means life without money. This is a significant barrier to education, to housing, to startup, to political engagement. Bake sales and barbecues will not cut it, and friends and family may not be an option. How do you finance a movement without money? How do you finance a movement without credit? It is notoriously difficult for some groups to access finance, and the microaggressions can serve to keep you from ever asking more than once. A loans officer once told me that she and her husband had 2 children and 1 car, and she didn't think I needed a second car. Mind you, the first so-called car was a vehicle that was being used as a full-time taxi, which was my side hustle back in the day. I have not banked with that institution since. That was 25 years ago. And the humiliation of being made to beg and to justify why I needed what really would have been my first car lasted and has resulted in me very seldom moving myself to seek credit. Don't do that. Let us look at some of the more common issues surrounding money and access to money, because we are normally starved of credit. We tend to be bad at valuing our service. So even when we sell a product, we undersell it. Why? Because we believe that we aren't worth anything and our product isn't worth anything. When we are owed, we are seldom willing to pursue the debt because we don't want to be branded as greedy or as a bacchanalist or as a troublemaker. And as a result, we allow ourselves to be cheated out of our hard-earned resources. We tend to give away services because of some kind of misplaced morality or wrong-worded religiosity. If we continue to do this, our businesses will continue to fail and our movements will continue to flounder. Money, or the lack of money, particularly for communities that have not been particularly for communities that have been accustomed to living with little, has an outsized effect on our ability to create and sustain businesses over the long term. This is a real challenge because our expertise and creativity needs to be coupled with genuine financial literacy. It is imperative that we start to develop the skill of financial fluency and to talk the language of money. A command of financial lingo and the ability to read and comprehend spreadsheets and balance sheets are going to be important if we are going to be approaching commercial markets, private lenders, and grant funders for financing. We cannot ask for money that we do not understand how we are going to spend or how we are going to grow. We need to stop asking for money that we do not need. And similarly, we need to start asking for money that we actually need, as opposed to pretending that we need less. None of this we can do without a clear financial literacy understanding. And that is one of the things that is a continuing challenge in the margins to grow. But we must do it because it operates to our own detriment. Now, I will do a roundup perhaps after we come back, but what I want to remind is that we have to ask ourselves, is there such a thing as a just future? We have to remind ourselves that all worlds do not operate the same. All margins are not mirrors of the other margins. We have to understand how our own margin operates before we take advice from persons on margins that do not mirror ours. The margins that operate in the cisgender white male community does not mirror the margins of the global south. When cis white women tell us to lean in, there is nothing for the global south to lean into except an empty wall. So you have to be careful in defining your margin and refining the messages that you receive, sometimes rejecting them outright because they do not mirror your own world. Understand your own ambition as opposed to running from it. Understand it in its raw form, in its ugly form, in the form that you cannot present to public. Grapple with it in private. That is important because it will allow you to understand what moves you, what drives you, and the extent that you are willing to go to achieve your goals. Get into the room by any means necessary. Get into the room. The constraints for getting in the room are only determined by your private morality, nothing more. You must get into the room if you want to be heard. Margaret, I'm going to turn it over to you to go to the transition lounge, and when we come back, we can round up.
Thank you. Woo! Exciting stuff. I'm sure we've all gotten some insight and some deposits from different things that Chris may have said. May not agree on everything, and that's what the discussion and dialogue, we can, open it up in a few minutes and go through any clarification, anything you want to discuss further based on this, or based on what Chris has said. We'll come back to it in a few minutes, and we'll open the floor up to everybody. Before that, what we like to do before we open up this space is we're going to do a transition launch. Lipsa, how long is the break? We encourage you, if you want to go to the bathroom and have a little bite to eat, or 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you can do that now. But those of you who may have your water on your table and you can just get up where you're at and stay with us, we invite you to stay with us, because we now have what we call a transition lounge. And at Future Law, we are all about an embodied approach to legal system change. It's not just all up in our heads and what are the rules and policies that we need to change, but how do we bring all of ourselves into creating a just future from our perspective. And in order to do that, we need to always remember to bring that connection between our mind, our heart, our gut, our spirit, and to come and to integrate ourselves from that space. So what we do in this transition launch, facilitated by Alyssa, is that we guide you into, connecting with your body and yourself. And through that connection, we then open up the dialogue where we can speak from that heart-centered place, hopefully we get there. So that transition launch is about 12 to 15 minutes, and then we come back and discuss to the end of the time that we have scheduled. So Alyssa, are you here? Chris, you want to say something? Oh, and so Alyssa, are you here?
I'm here.
Okay,
I'm so
right.
pleased to be here with you this morning.
You too. And so if people want to run and get a thing, you can do it, but encourage you to stay, because this is really an opportunity to get in touch with yourself and what's going on in your body. Like, I feel to get up and move already because we've been sitting for such a long time. But yeah, Alyssa, over to you, my love.
Thank you. I encourage you, if you would like actually to try the exercises standing today, that's perfectly fine. If you're more comfortable turning your camera off because you don't want people to see you, maybe with the eyes crossed or breathing funny, you can feel free to turn your camera off. If you're seated, I encourage you to come to the front of your seat or come to the edge of your seat and give yourself some room. Sit upright. Dancers say they sit on their sit bones. So you sit upright and notice the instruction I'm going to give. Your hands, your gluteus maximus, AKA your butt. If you're in a space where other people might see you grabbing your butt and it's going to be inappropriate, don't do it. But after you sit, you move the meat of your butt out from under you. So you're sitting on what dancers call your sit bones. Roll your shoulders back and allow your chest to be open. Give your neck some room. And notice where your body is in space. Notice where you are and where you end. What are your margins? When we work in marginal spaces, it's very important to have a sense of who we are, where we are, and where we begin and end, as well as what we're expanding into. If you choose to stand, bring the weight of your body onto the balls of your feet and give yourself that same room up your spine so that your head almost dances like one of those creatures you see at a car wash. We begin to count the breath. So begin to make your in-breath and your out-breath even. We begin at 2 and breathe in, 2, out, 2. Notice how that feels in your body. And if that is comfortable, you can increase that to 3, 4, or even 5, but only if it's comfortable. And don't force the breath, but allow the breath to enter and to leave gently. Feel the connection between noticing the breath, maybe slowing it down, and see if that brings an increased feeling of ease anywhere in your body. Or maybe another sensation arises, and if something else arises, allow it to be. Simply notice it and continue to count and to breathe evenly. When we want to start a fire with wood or coal or kindling, first we make a clearing. So now as we even the breath, we make a clearing, some space and interlude in this wonderful class. A little ease within ourselves, a chance to notice if anything that came up made us anxious, if anything brought excitement, if there's a possibility that we see. Now bring a hand either to your heart or to the center of your chest, or maybe two hands if that feels comfortable. And see if you begin to match the breaths that you take to your heartbeat. So when your heart beats, you take a breath and match that, and see how that feels in your body. Keep the breath even as well. Keep breathing. We think about the fire again. After clearing, we begin to gather fuel and heat them. Not too tight, because we need air in there, so we need space. And we arrange the kindling and maybe have some larger logs. And when we light the fire, if we begin to blow, we must blow gently, gently at first, so as to feed the flame but not blow it out. How does it feel to pay attention to your breath and your heartbeat at the same time? And we come from the margins and clear a little space for ourselves and light that small flame. We connect our fuel and our spark in what might be a little space at first. And as the fire gets bigger, we can blow harder. And after a while, we have a blaze. And if we blow on that, as much as we blow on that, we're not going to put it out by blowing. We might change the direction a little bit. And as the fire becomes more powerful, we have to take care that it stays contained. We have to tend it, lest it leave the pit and roar into the rest of the forest. Release your hands to your lap now. Release the breath to its own rhythm. And pause for a minute and just notice what is happening in your body. Bring your attention into the center of yourself. And if you feel resourced, you might ask the question, where's my power? And see what arises. Leave space for the answer to come. We're going to do breath of fire now. We breathe through the nose, concentrate on the exhale. And if you're not familiar with this pattern, just look at me for a little while. It looks and sounds like this. If that's challenging, go slower. Concentrate on the exhale. The inhale will come. If you feel dizzy while doing that, return to even breaths. But try it and see how it feels in your body. Go at a pace that's comfortable for you. And let's begin. Breath of fire. Keep going. You might feel tingles. The energy in your body might change. You might feel a little tightness around your diaphragm or in your tummy. Feel how it feels to encourage that energy in your body by engaging with the breath. Only go as intensely or as quickly as it's comfortable for you. But keep trying. If you need to go to even breaths for a while, do that and then come back. Come back. This pattern brings us to more alertness. So we'll be ready for the discussion that we're going into next. A few more seconds. Really try the breath. Give yourself the experience of seeing where your margin is, where you feel uncomfortable, where this feels challenging, where it feels different, and allow it to be. We release this pattern. Take a nice breath in. Sigh out through the mouth, and again, breath in. Sigh out through the mouth. We'll do some staggered breathing now. Don't worry, just follow me. I'll count and just follow the count. One more big exhale. And breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in, 2, 3, 4, and hold the breath, hold the breath, hold the breath. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. And hold, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Release the pattern and notice the sensations arising in your body. Take a nice juicy breath in. Sigh out through the mouth. One more big inhale. Exhale again. See if anything has changed. Just take a moment. I'll be quiet. And just notice what is happening in your body. You might ask again, where is my power? Where do I feel my power? And for a moment, if you can, mind your headphones, stand. I'll remain seated so you can see me. Assume a hero pose, whether that is yeah, or like, you know, at the Olympics at the finish line, or like Superman, you know, in the breeze with your cape flowing. Assume a pose of power and see how that feels in your body and stand in your power for a moment. Clench your fists or wave your hands over your head. Maybe jump up and down a little bit. Go, yeah. And what does your power sound like to you? Feel that in your body. One more time, really go for it. You're off camera, you're quiet. Go, yeah, oh yeah. And feel that inside you. Your very best Superman blowing in the breeze impersonation. Center cool and everything. When you feel disconnected or on the sidelines or left in the margins, if you want to center and connect to your breath, to stoke your inner fire, you can do some inhales and exhales and stand in your hero pose. Maybe do some breath of fire there. If you're about to go into a meeting and you can't yell, do it in your mind. Shout mentally and connect to that inner feeling of power. Hold your hero pose for 30 seconds, then move into your task. Lit powerfully from the inside. Now come back to sit. A couple more deep breaths. And here we are together in this community, lit up, ready to dive back into Christlyn's session, ready to go. I will hand you back over to Margaret, who will take you back to Christlyn. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to play in the margins, to experience the power there, and to move into the center of your inner self. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alyssa. That was a beautiful transition. Also helping us to think about power from the margins and how do we leverage power from the margins? We leverage power from the margins by connecting to our power within. That was very beautiful, Alyssa. Thank you. Was so good. Yeah, so we want to open up the space now to us discussing what it is to leverage power from the margins. And I would invite you guys to share your stories of when you've leveraged power, to ask questions of Christlyn as well. This is our open space now for dialogue. Maybe you can put everything on gallery view so we can see who's in the room. Feel free to, come off the mic. Open your mic, open your video and chat with us. I can kick it off because this topic is so near to my heart. It is everything. And I want to share a story of how I showed up to try to create system change in the Caribbean, in Trinidad and Tobago, and leverage power from the margins, if we were to call it that. And Christlyn said about one of the things about the margins is the size. It's how outsized it actually is. We're made to feel like the margins are just this, we're on the outskirts and all of that. But the margins, when we look at the examples Christlyn wrote with George Floyd and Hong Kong and all of that, are the vast majority of us. And I remember in Trinidad and Tobago when there were a series of corruption scandals. This is maybe 15, going in 15 years ago or more. And, I was involved in one of these huge corruption inquiries, and I've becoming very, wait a minute, how do governments spend our money again? What are the laws and rules that govern that? And recognizing that even as a lawyer, when I was in law school and university, there was no attention placed on how governments make decisions over our money. Yeah. And I remember, as much of us do, we global south, you're looking to find, well, what's the right way for governments to manage our money and our affairs? And, you start doing research from the global south, because it wasn't in our educational program in law. I can tell you it wasn't. It is now, right? But it wasn't. And you start researching and you start learning all this stuff, the World Bank, the UN, IMF, they're sharing model laws, model guidelines, and you in the global south then, well, the UN says this is the right way to do something. So this is the law we must have in our country. So we must put this law in place. So for me, when I started my journey, it was all about public procurement law. Why don't we have an overarching public procurement law? Let's make that happen. And one of the things I learned in my journey, which I think really assimilates to what Chris is saying about the power of the margin, is when I first started, I was like, yeah, we need to have this law, we need to have this law. But within a couple of years, I started to really reflect. And because of you're trying to force a government to put a policy in place that constrains their power, it's very difficult. They don't want to give up their power. And so I had to reflect and say, is it that we need this law changed, or is there some other way that we can make the system more fair and accountable? And I reflected on the size of the amount of people in an organization. And so with the organization that I created, we did some research and we found out that we were able to see that at least in Trinidad and Tobago, and it was kind of constant for other English-speaking Caribbean countries with a common law background, that in organizations, in order for corruption to occur, right, everyone really wasn't corrupt, right? There were just a couple people in organizations who would be engaging in acts of corruption. And how is it that these couple people in hierarchically had the power, were able to do these things, but the vast majority of the organization, the human beings, the professionals, were actually wonderful people with integrity who wanted to do well, who wanted to serve the people of the country? How do we leverage that power of that organization? It was from that exact sort of insight that I said, wait a minute, in order for a corrupt transaction to occur, one person at the top of the organization or two may be benefiting from it, but they can't do it by themselves. People in an organization needed to either turn a blind eye, a deaf ear, close their mouths on something, about 5 in every organization. When you looked at the procurement process, when you looked at how decisions are made, on average, 5 people had to turn a blind eye, turn a deaf ear, or not say what they saw. And so therefore 99% of the organization is actually trying to do the right thing. How do you leverage their power? You leverage their power by creating what we did in Trinidad and Tobago. I created the Caribbean Procurement Institute, and we started educating them and empowering them as to how to stand up and leverage their power within organizations and build their capacity to understand what was right and what was wrong, and how to, even with even whistleblow. So they're, supporting them with how to whistleblow in a way that they were protected. And so what we were doing there was empowering the 99% of the organization to become watchdogs in every organization. And I mean, it really was an interesting trajectory and journey. And so, this concept of leveraging power from the margins is so important, guys, that you don't just look at change as coming in one way or only being able to come in one way. So I really endorse that. So that's my little story about how I work to try to leverage power from the margins by empowering, creating a business and an NGO that supported the vast majority to hold the minority who were corrupt or who wanted to be corrupt to account. Do we have anybody else with their stories and or questions, more questions for Chris on how we leverage power from the margins? Really?
I just wanted to say thank you so much for that point about the 3 effing horsemen. I found that really, I mean, aside from the alliteration, which I'm never going to forget, that idea of the financing is really, all of them important, but really being able to be resourced is a critical point. So thank you for sharing that so clearly.
Financing is really important, particularly when you're building a political organization. If you are not mainstream political organization, then of course you're going cap in hand to anybody who you can sell your vision or sell your dream to. But I feel that what we do is we apologize when we ask for the money. It's a beg, oh gosh, I go win, But I feel if we harness the language of finance and we build something that is more lasting than a political organization, then we aren't begging. We are really asking for an investment, not a personal investment in our popularity or our ability to engage a crowd, but we are asking for an investment in an idea that has a dynastic component. It must be able to outlast us, to be bankable. That's the first thing. And we must speak in the language of business growth, of idea growth. So it's not $50,000 to start my little project. It must be a fuller conversation about how this project impacts the community. What is the possibility for sustainability? How is it going to be resourced by people, whether the investment is 100% investment or 25% investment? And if the latter, where are we sourcing the next 75% and sustainability? I think that is how we need to start talking if we are building organizations. And it's not a language that many of us have been taught. You have to go out and get that information and convert it.
On that issue of language as power, when we think of racism, Chris, I remember you saying, language, what's the language of power?
Yes.
And how do we look at the underlying need? What do you think about that when we think about racism and, what people are saying, white supremacy and all of that?
Several things are going on that front now. Coming from a Black population or a non-white population in Trinidad and Tobago, racism is not, we don't think of racism in the same way I believe, as racism is taught of in, you know, in Europe and so on, where racism is frontal. But we have to realize that many of our systems were built on the concept of racism and on the fundamentals of racism. And in fact, many of these post-colonial systems, they were created with a particular aim. The fact that the society has changed doesn't mean that the legacy has been erased. So I think it is very important to understand where you fall as a community or as an individual on that spectrum. So, and to listen to the anecdotes from the margins. So for example, anecdotally, in Trinidad and Tobago, there is a preference to giving one race credit, meaning money credit, as opposed to another. That is the language from the margins, that some races, or I should say, Black people are not bankable, but somebody else with the exact same business plan is bankable. Now, if the bank or if the access to finance represents a hurdle that we need to overcome, then it's important to understand whether that organization is meting out power in the context of a racist messaging that they have received, whether inadvertently or accidentally, and deciding to refine your message to cut through that. It often, a confrontational approach is not advised. You can't go to the loan officer and then say, well, I hear all they don't lend Black people money. I mean, that's not going to get you anywhere. But you find that many people approach it by partnering. That is one way to get around the issue. You partner with someone who you feel is culturally more appropriate, for want of a better descriptor, appropriate face, or a better face for your organization. Better is not the word I want, but the words escape me. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to, of course, seek the resources that you need from a favorable source. If Bank A has a particular policy, you go to Bank B, but sometimes that isn't possible. So you have to honestly hear the language, not simply what is presented. And sometimes a slower conversation with the point person to the power broker or the gatekeeper might be important. So for example, where you may be busying yourself talking to a loan officer, it might be more helpful to talk to the teller who lives down the street. She may well know what the actual problem is, whether it is an institutional problem or a personal problem to this particular set of officers, or really, maybe it's not a problem at all. Maybe this person has other issues that he's dealing with. Again, tapping into the power of the margin, the information that the margin has is at the base, because the margins are the shredders, they are the tellers, they are the cleaners. They overhear important conversations and they understand even more than people at the managerial level how the organization really works. You have access to them, and that should not be ignored.
Thanks. I see we have a question from Chantal and then Monsieur.
I think Monsieur was there before me.
Oh, was he? Sorry.
You go first, Chantal. Oh.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Christlyn, for sharing what you have today. I've actually texted Margaret and I said to her, I was sitting with tears in my eyes, actually, with some of the things that you were saying, because it was just very touching. I think especially when you spoke of anonymity and invisibility. I think for a number of reasons. So a lot of your references today was around South Africa. I'm phoning in today from South Africa. So I'm a lived experience, through the South African system, which as a woman of color is a very unique experience. And it doesn't leave you. You know, my most recent experience was and because of COVID, most of our interactions are through social media, on WhatsApp groups, and even in, you know, the kind of intellectual type of conversation. So we're having a challenge in SA around our energy transition, moving away from coal towards more cleaner sources, because we are a high emitting country. So I'll share an incident with you that I handled it, but it just left me reeling like, my God, this country is so damaged, you know. So the experience was, they were people, there was, I know for sure it was a white South African male who made a comment that the country is completely uninvestable. And so, which is quite a sweeping statement. It's completely uninvestable. So I made a comment to that, and I'm like, I understand why you might say that, but it's probably uninvestable relative to the needs of the investor. But if you flip it around to the needs of what needs to happen, then there are lots of opportunities. There are small, rural, women, youth. I mean, we've got loads of things. So what makes investable? Investable is the perspective of the funder. Investable is not the perspective of the need, right? So the comment that came back to me was so typical aggro South African male, and I'm also stereotyping, I mustn't do that, but I am, was, you know, I don't know who you are, I've not met you before, but I really suggest you grow up and you go and get some more life experience, and then you can come back and speak about this. And that's after me having worked in investment banking on Wall Street, having worked on international climate funds, having done policy work, and actually being over 50. So there is a, you know, the assumptions, you know, that they exist in society are so rife. And it's, I mean, and at this stage, and I've just come back from the UK, so it was a real shock for me when that happened. And it has put me into a space this year of actually thinking, I know I've got some really interesting ideas, and I know I'm creative. Like when you were speaking about the skills, I really resonated with that. Like, what's your skill? It's not the paper, because that just gives you some legitimacy, which sometimes the other needs more than you need it. You know your story, but to get into the room and to get a seat at the table, it makes a big difference to others if you masters or PhD or professor this or what. It's, I mean, I think it's a bit silly, but they need it. You know, they need it more than we need it, actually. No one's going to give up, you know, nobody's really necessarily going to give you a room at the table if you don't have, you know, certain qualifications. So it just struck me that, but this year I find myself wanting to go more into anonymity and invisibility space. And what I really liked what you said was, I think how you framed it, to, in a way, protect your story until you're ready to have your coming out party, in a way. Yes. That's how I interpreted it, but perhaps you can share when it was necessary for you to follow that route, and how did it work for you, without it being something that is a fear-based anonymity and invisibility, because you don't want to put your head above the parapet, you know, to get shot out. And how do you then protect the space and create partners from a place of almost that kind of power? Because even I think it was Matthieu in the comments who made the point that the margins fight with themselves, you know. I hope I'm not misinterpreting what you said, but that's what I heard. There's no language even in the margins to bring the margins together. So that's why the power bases hold their power base so strongly and don't feel threatened sometimes, especially with some issues, because they're like, oh, you know, you can't get your act together, so we discount you. You know, I'll stop there.
Wow, like, wow. But to go to your question, I have been in this situation, and I think many of us have been, where you have all these ideas, you know, you're just ready to like launch, but you are acutely aware that the moment you step out, somebody will shoot you down. And it is really easier to operate in a landscape of support than a landscape of, you know, infighting. And if you can control that until you're strong enough to fight, then that's great. Now, I experienced this as a young lawyer. I was a very easy target. First of all, I kind of stand out in a room. You know, I'm a little taller, I'm a little darker, I'm a little louder. So I'm hard to miss. I'm kind of like a traffic light, right? And people were taking all kinds of shots at me. Like, it was so weird. So the most banal shot, I'll give you this example, is that I went to court with trousers one day. And I was hauled before a judge in his chambers. And he's like, I understand you were wearing trousers. And I'm like, what? You know, and then a couple days later, another judge hauled me to her chambers because I was wearing a brown suit. But it's clear that there was some cross talk. And when I analyzed it, I mean, I was in tears. I cried for hours because I was working in Trinidad where I didn't have a community. I didn't have my family there. I didn't come from a line of lawyers. I didn't have any friends. I didn't know who to talk to. And it was very, very clear to me that I was being targeted. But why would anybody want to target me? I'm a nobody. Do not underestimate the sense of a predator to recognize suitable prey. That's the first thing. People come after you when you think you have nothing to offer, but they sense your ability. They can smell it, right? And it is in their interest to destroy you before you become an equal, or worse yet, better than or a threat. So it took me a while to figure out that is what was happening, that these people saw some ability in me, perceived a threat, and decided that they would excoriate it before it began. So I needed now to shrink without shrinking, right? So you can approach it in a set of ways. You could all of a sudden become an idiot. You know, I don't know anything. I have no answer to no question. I don't participate. That's one way. But eventually you start to, the danger is that you will believe it at some point in time, or it will go on for so long that you can't come back. How I dealt with it was to make friends, to approach these same people and to make a point of talking to them, engaging them, soliciting their opinions, you know, asking them to contribute to me, admitting that my knowledge was not particularly extensive or incredibly insightful, that I was still willing to grow and they had something to teach. That made me more human and less of a threat to them. And eventually they moved on. So that is one approach, you know, but it is important to assess how big the threat is. You know, if it's some random person you're never going to meet again, you met them on an airplane, who cares? But if this is someone in your industry, you need to look out, because chances are that person is talking to another person who's talking to another person who's talking to another person. And even though the people that they talk to have never met you, they will remember whatever is the untrue picture that is painted. So you need to actively work to dull whatever threat that person believes you to be, to dull that threat so that you can have an opportunity to thrive.
Thank you, Chris. Matteo?
Thanks, Christlyn. I've got if I can ask two questions, kind of connected to everything. And one is a practical question, something I'm dealing with. The first one is really this question, I suppose law is a way of cutting up the world into categories. And I noticed you used the word global south and global north. And, you know, and I'm wondering what term you use for yourself and the communities you're in, because another word you used was the free world. And then it makes the sense, well, what's the unfree world, or what's the other world? And it just feels like when we're talking about justice, I kind of put this comment in there around that the nation state idea of the state, and that we need to find this common consciousness, because the planetary cycles themselves are breaking down, and that is, we need to stay within that framework and to try to. I'm in England, but to feel that connection. The global south, the term makes it very distant, like, oh, it's over there, the global. I like to find terms that connect us, like we are the free world together or something. I don't know, but so I'm just wondering what terms you use within your countries to define who you are, rather than adopting maybe the dominant language's way of defining you.
That is a good one. I hadn't realized I had used the term the free will. That is odd for me. I do use Global South, and recently I was introduced to Global Majority, which I quite like. I am attracted to Global South because you do seem far away to me. There is no real relationship other than the legacy of colonialism that connects me to the UK. And so if the term the Global South seems like a place a millennia away, then I can assure you that that is how it feels. So the descriptor really mirrors how I feel. As I said, I have recently been introduced to Global Majority, which makes me feel more connected, which is more of a connected term, because it makes me feel that I am part of a larger group of Black and brown people around the world. And because it is coupled with, global is coupled with majority, it makes me feel a little warm inside, because of course I am accustomed to being in the margins and to the stigma of the margin and having to overcome it. And it's really nice to be part of a global majority and to share in the victories of the global majority in a way that I had not felt able to participate in before. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. When I was a child, you look at TV and you look at things like the Olympics. And of course, because we're so small and we compete in so few events, and I like the Olympics, I like sports, I like gymnastics, but Trinidad and Tobago would never field a gymnast, but I had to root for somebody, right? So you root for the Americans, because that's what TV tells you. The Americans are good people, and root for the Americans no matter what. Now that I've matured, of course, I see it in a different light, but I'm able now, as part of the global majority, to root for people of color everywhere, right? Because that's what I want to do. I want to feel that I am part of a victory that has bears some kind of resemblance to me. The pointed part of your question is, how do I describe myself at home? And I very deliberately describe myself as Tobagonian, because that comes with a weight of identity. So being Tobagonian in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and describing yourself as Tobagonian really invites attack. That is me choosing every day to run into a fire. I can easily say I'm Trini, which is a shorthand, or I'm Trinbagonian, which is, culturally correct, politically correct, but I don't make those choices. I make the choice of saying Tobagonian to remind that I do have a separate identity, and there is a group of people with a separate history, identity, set of passions, set of goals, set of dreams, and that I'm a member by choice of this community, and I choose not to be invisible for their sake.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I think, that's interesting what you're saying about the distance. I guess the reason I mentioned this is I do quite a lot with Extinction Rebellion, and they have this, and this about the planetary breakdown, and one of the comebacks often is that this is, it's happening in the global south. It's not going to affect here. This is what our government's kind of, I think, is like pushing the kind of like, look around you. It's all okay here. And so the more that that consciousness can be created, that what's happening over there is also happening here, that we're interdependent, the more I feel we can find that common consciousness. And that kind of links to the second question I wanted, which is the kind of a practical question. So England is broken, UK is broken down to Wales, and I've been working with some young adults from marginalised communities in Wales recently, and just put a link to Wales was found, 2 of the arts institutions were found to be institutionally racist by a body which they commissioned themselves to look at their sort of policies around arts and commissioning. And they found, and then the same day, the ex-leader of one of the parties made this kind of tweet that was about whether people want to be ruled by the Taliban or by them or something. It was some crazy tweet that just created, especially among these young adults who are marginalized, just this real pain that everything that they've been doing to try to like create bridges and so on, they feel like they're just being used all the time. And finally, yeah, so I've been trying to like support, like, and I'm just wondering what the reason I'm saying is because I also feel there's a kind of a political way of this kind of dog whistle politics that comes from Trump, that you consciously know you're going to create this disruption and people are going to start crying out and so on, just to bring your attention to it and brings you up. So it's not even, it's kind of this term dog whistle politics, which creates this division. And so I'm trying to work out, how do you, even that how do you become bigger than what is being attempted on you to keep you divided so people can stay in particular positions of power or gain power as well?
You know, what I have realized is that the people who respond to dog whistle politics are just as afraid as we are. That's why it works, because it says to them, you are not alone. We understand that you are going to go extinct, that your way of life is under threat, that the privileges you had or you enjoyed, they may be going out the window. We say, and rightly so, yes, but it doesn't negate the rightness of our argument and the justness in terms of time. The justness of our argument does not negate the fact that people are frightened. And I think you have to find some way to quiet that fear, so that when the dog whistle sounds, there's another layer after the fear, or the fear doesn't get triggered at all. It is hard for us as people who have been hurt to even comprehend that the persons who have excoriated us could also be frightened. It's completely weird, but it is a reality that we have to find a way to confront and start a dialogue with. I was looking at a documentary, I think on Netflix, some months ago, with regard to homelessness in South Africa. And I don't remember the name of the park, of course, but there is a park where, you know, there's quite a bit of white homelessness. It's a huge park, and people have been there for years, homeless. And across the park, you know, you have people enjoying themselves and so on, Black people. And so the narrator is, you know, he's interviewed these guys, these white guys, these families, small children, they've been in the park forever. And, you know, their situation is dire. And then he goes across the park, I suppose miles, and he says to the Black people, he says, you know, there are homeless white people across there. And they're like, oh, come on, could never be, impossible. It's completely alien to them that the historic oppressor could be in difficult streets. And I think that is a challenge. Unless we find a way to talk to the currently oppressed, no matter in which camp they sit, that is really the challenge, to find a common language of all oppressed groups, so that these nationalists, these tribalists don't have as much power when they blow that whistle.
Thank you. Yeah, that just, if I can just, maybe that brings it back to Martin Luther King, because
Yes.
that common language, we keep being triggered into fear because it's like, that's the common emotion. But the other common emotion is love. And when I hear you speak, even though there's a lot of fierceness, it comes from love, and people can feel that. And I think maybe there's some, what I was telling to the young, I trust you to find that root of love in when you communicate back in your response. If you find that, then you'll find your response come. And I think people can feel that even if you're typing words, that something can if we can find, among ourselves, this language and place, then I think, that's something. Thank you.
Yes.
Beautiful, Marcia. Lorna, good to see you. Your hands up.
Yeah, hi. Forgive the look. It's been a long day already. We're on lockdown here, so it's kind of crazy. Anyway, Christlyn, this has been mind-blowing. I'm so impressed by how you have brought all of these elements together. Most of them are very familiar to me, as I'm sure they are to everybody. But we sort of navigate them, sometimes bobbing under the water, sometimes swimming, sometimes occasionally soaring, often confused and swirling. But you've brought it all together for us to sort of try to make some sense out of it in a comprehensive way. And I really do appreciate that.
Thank you.
So I don't know if I have a question, so if I can just talk, maybe a question will emerge, because I'm not sure. I'm a little swirling myself at the moment.
Just
So
share.
So you understand my context. I'm a lawyer, practicing lawyer. I've been practicing law for over 30 years, and I practice commercial law. But I've always known myself to be on the margins. I'm English, as you can probably tell by my accent, but I now live in Jamaica. I was on the margins in the UK, worse as a corporate commercial lawyer who I made it in, but I was still on the margins. I left and came to Jamaica. I'm so very much on the margins here. Margaret and I talk about this from time to time. But I practice in the area of commercial law. This is not my love. My actual love is consciousness work. That's what I am passionately attuned to. And that's what I'll be moving more into over time. But right now I practice in commercial law. And I've facilitated so many people who do not look like me to do well. That has been my job, really, to facilitate them becoming, and remaining financially successful. So for a while, myself and my business partner have been pulling together a financial project. It's the largest financial project we have ever done. We're way, way out of our depth, Christlyn, way out of our depth. And we're at the point where we're consulting, but the people who we're consulting with are now telling us, essentially, let me just reduce it to this. It can't be done. You can't do it. We can do it. And my partner is close to saying, oh, let them do it. They can do it. They're the big boys. They've got the resources. Let them do it. And there's a big part of me, Christlyn, that's saying, no, we always do this. We always just roll over and let them take it over. And how do we use our own agency to and galvanize ourselves to get a piece of the action, to be financially viable, that we can be helpful, that we can do the things that we are passionate about, that we can do the things that we want to do. I've personally given so much of my own personal resources to helping and doing, as I'm sure most of us here have. But this is an opportunity that we have to have some to build a foundation, a financial foundation that we can leverage for bigger and better things for the community. And yet we're at this place where it could go either way. That's the truth of it. It could go either way. Yeah.
Wow.
Help.
Well, you know, it is so interesting. We seldom leverage our relationships, right? And it's one of the things that I recognized when I was preparing for this, that we are selfless, and it's a point of pride. I mean, it's a point of pride. We are selfless, you know, our rewards are up in heaven and all of that. Of course, all of it part of the colonial legacy, right? That teaches us, particularly women, particularly Black women, that our rewards are not here, okay? Our reward is in heaven. So that takes that first part needs to shift. The other thing is that just listening to you, you have amassed 30 years of legal experience in the corporate field. Building other people's businesses, successful businesses, means that people owe you. And I'm almost certain you've called in not one favor. Not one. You, all those people whose successful businesses are going guns because of your effort. Your effort, you haven't called one of them. But that's not what happens in the corridors of power. If I so much as open the door for you, tomorrow I want a favor. The favor bank is constantly replenishing. And we need to learn that. I mean, I'm talking to you as much as I'm talking to myself. Yesterday I had a call from an entrepreneur who I chat with from time to time. And I've never asked anything. He uses me as a sounding board, and you know, that's quite fine. But I was in the middle of preparing for this. And I made an ask. I said, you know, you are building this empire, and I don't want a job. I don't need a job. But I want to be at the table for all your negotiations. I want to be a team member because I want to learn. The community cannot build itself. The community cannot be your family alone. To whom much is given, much is expected. So I can imagine you don't want to give handouts every Tom, Dick, and Harry. But it makes no sense that you have an empire and all of us are minions. At some stage, we're going to storm the castle. You have to build it out. So I made an ask. I said, every negotiation going forward, I don't care where it is, I will spend my money, I will find the hotel room, but I want to show up. And it was an easy yes, because what is he losing? I cannot compete with him. He has a huge conglomerate. I don't even have a shop selling toilet paper, right? But it's about seeing how the wheels work. So what I'm saying to you is, you really need to make some asks. Margaret and I were in Amway years ago. Margaret, do you remember? Not our proudest moment. But the first thing they told us to do is make a list. Make a list of, I can't remember, 50 or 100 people. And call all of them. Make a list based on your relationships. And pitch it. You know this project. You built this project. And you know the businesses that can support you in keeping the project. You also know the businesses that can support you in partnering to bring the project to fruition, because that's another thing that we have to learn, I think. We have to accept when we cannot keep the whole project. But you know, 75% of the cake is better than no cake at all, right? So you know, Lorna, I am with you. This is gonna happen because you're gonna find your Rolodex from Corporate Life UK, and you're gonna call all those sons of bitches and remind them. You have to hold people's foot to the flames and remind them of how good you are and why you are bankable and why this project is bankable.
Thank you so much for that. That's a proverbial kick up the pants. Go talk, use your voice. Thank you so much, Christlyn. Yeah.
Christlyn, can I just say, I think you're badass.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Awesome.
Awesome, awesome,
I'll have you on
awesome.
my negotiating. I'll have you on my negotiating team any day.
Any day. And you know, I had the privilege of going to school with quite a lot of Jamaicans. Still have good friends there at the bench and at the bar. So big up to Justice Lisa Palmer, Justice David Fraser, Delano Franklin. Big up, big up.
Okay, yes, yes. Well, if I see them, I'll tell them.
Wow. Do we have anybody else wants to tap Christlyn's brain to help them to leverage power from the margins?
You know, while you're canvassing, I want to say this. Sometimes when we critically assess our skills, we find we have more ambition than ability. To me, that is not fatal. It's not fatal, right? Because of course we all go at a different rate. But when you realize, when you accept, when you admit that without shame or judgment or self-castigation, then the question is, well, what do I do? And the answer to that is partnering. If you are a man, there is a shortcut through that. And I mean, I say this with no judgment, but I have found it to be true. If you are a man with more ambition than ability and you desire to tap the margins, these private societies, I don't know if that is a term, these lodges, that is a good way to assemble with a group of like-minded people who will support your trajectory. So what I'm really trying to say is, even if the group is not favored by society, I mean, I'm not saying go and join a gang, right? But I'm saying find a group. You know, if you can't create a group, find a group. There are groups out there that will help to supplement what you lack in terms of ability. And that is something I think the margins often don't access, because those groups project, you know, a certain image, but that is a carefully curated image, meaning that they could move you to that image as well. And that is a value that should not go untapped.
Monsieur again. There we go.
If I can ask, because I've only got Christlyn here for a short time, and she's a badass as well. And I haven't got the skills to speak directly, and so I'm trying to set up new economy law, which is this thing, which is meant to, you know, I'm not going to say what exactly it's trying to support people from the marginal sides to actually bring their voice to these transactions in planning law and inequality law as well. But in starting this, I'm just trying to work out in terms of I've got groups, and there's lots of different groups, mutual support and all this, but everyone's still vying for position, and who's doing the research harvesting, who's not, who's taking your information. The thing I want is about, how do you go about the financing, the first step? Do you, I mean, even like going with a bull to do a grant fund application and finding that, do you go that way, or do you do a transactional approach that I'm giving something of value, I want something back, or are you going for an NGO kind of basis? So I will get the beneficiary somebody else, so I'm going to, you know, get a grant to do my work?
So my approach would be, first of all, you are describing several groups on a landscape. And what I would do is I would ask the CEOs of all those groups to meet and get a, how do I say, get a sense of who is the best person in our group for what. So, you know, if this institution was going to burn down, who would you want to save and why? You would find that each group wants to save a different person for a different thing. Maybe somebody is strong here, strong there, strong there. And if it is possible, I would do a core of those people. So not a new group, but, you know, call it whatever you want, you know, team, go build or whatever. And use the best of all these groups to target everybody, right? So, because if you try to do it alone, your organization might be too small, you might be too stretched. So grant funding, yes, but you may not have the best grant fund writer. It may he or she may reside elsewhere, right? So if you can encourage a collaboration for mutual benefit, where you can, you know, you can tap all sources of funding as appropriate. Of course, that is utopia, that is the ideal. If that is not possible, and you can't get any collaboration at all, because remember, you may have 10 groups in this space, you don't, and ideally 10 should collaborate, but if you have one, you're 100% better than where you were before, right? So collaboration, try. I mean, that is a really important lesson. And remember to, you may not see the fruit of it. That's a challenge. That's a challenge that you have to adjust your view of time, right? Nobody owes you the promised land, but you owe us the journey, yeah? So collaboration, first off. The second thing, of course, a critical analysis of who you know in each of the other organizations, because again, we're trying to pull our resources. And your first resources are the people who you know, who speak your language, who look like you, who have the same ideals as you. So that is the next layer. Do these people exist? In which case, you know, you need to have a conversation. The third layer, of course, is which is the funding I can afford. If you cannot afford commercial funding, then it ought to be the very last option for funding. Your funding ought to be grant funding and fundraising, you know, at whatever level is appropriate. And again, you need experts in that. You don't want to go and sell cookies on the side of the road. That's not a good use of your time. It's not a good use of my time. So I'll give you an example. I used to be married some time ago, right? And I decided I would save money early on in my marriage by ironing my husband's shirts. So no problem. I set up the ironing board in front of the TV, Real Housewife thing. And I, you know, started to watch soap operas and I started to iron. I was like 4 shirts in when I realized like 4 hours had passed. I was averaging 45 minutes a shoot. I did the math. I was billing $500 an hour. So I had just wasted $2,000 of my time as opposed to spending $15 a shirt on dry cleaning. What on earth was I doing? I've never ironed a shirt since. That's not worth my time. So again, fundraising cannot be for you if your time is more valuable, your mind is more valuable to be put someplace else. You need to find these resources, preferably for free or, you know, or next to free. Now, with regard to leveraging the quid pro quo, I would say if there's already a relationship where you can trade expertise, you know, you're good at fundraisers and, you know, I did X for you yesterday, why not? But if it is something that you've now kind of come to terms with, again, it is worth a discussion over coffee. And it goes right back to our first premise of collaboration. How can I help you? Well, maybe you already know that because I helped you last week, but we have never discussed how you can help me. Here is the help I need.
Thank you. I'm going to just pick you up on just one thing though, because if I can, because it goes down to what you said before, time is different depending upon what value you create in the relationship, the quality of the relationship. And for me, the Western way of just trying to say, oh, it's all the same, £1,000 for 1 hour, and then you start equate, you know, get into this mindset already of mastery, control. But my heart also says that there are different kinds of relationships, and I'm like 15 minutes with my mother is worth 2 hours, doing my transactional work or something. So do you think like this, when you're ironing the quality of the time, the relationship, that we have different layers? So how do you cross this circle or square the circle?
So several concepts of time. If we are talking about the time to see a project through, you may have to admit that you are in a relay, and that by the time the last leg is run, you will no longer be in the organization. You may not even be alive. So that frees you, for me, it frees you, because you don't need to get from point A to point B in a year or in 2 years or in 3 years, right? So you can put in the time knowing that the project is much bigger than you. So that's one concept of time. In terms of my example, that is really a conversation about what are your core skills, and are you really saving money for a candle but you have to really pay for a funeral, right? So that exercise made no sense. What I was trying to do was not demonstrate love, in which case, yeah, I take 10 days to do one shirt, because it's all about showing love. What I was trying to do was save money, and that made no sense. I was losing money. So that's different. It depends on what the relationship or what the activity is really about, and that's important to identify.
Thank you.
Thank you. How are we going? How are we going for questions, guys? Do we have?
I have another question then. So previously we were speaking about how, for example, the investments are happening with or for the political party. And Christlyn, you mentioned that it's almost as if we are begging for the money whenever we are creating the political party, even though, for example, the people that might be supporting that political party share the same values and are having similar goals or aims. And then we were speaking, instead of begging for that money, about the investments. But then hearing what Chantal was saying about the investments and how, for example, every time the investors are actually looking for the returns, I'm now just wondering whether it's possible for us to think about not really having to beg anyone or asking for the investments alone, but rather think about something that is perhaps more visible in the new economy and the corporate law, which is the convertible loans. So giving us the money for, conversion into something else, be it a social impact or be it something that we are actually able to track, and then rewarding those people, not really in returns with interest rates and not necessarily in monetary form, but rather something completely different. And I'm just thinking out loud now, but it might be perhaps that we think about some sort of a different conversion and talk about collateral, which is perhaps a bit closer to the community type of a thought, or, we share common resources, we share these different goals, we should share responsibility for how we lead towards what needs to be done in our community, be it the local community or a global community. But are we able to really think about that collateral rather than just the investment that we are asking for when we are gathering the funds?
And that is a really interesting concept. And again, one is primed on literacy. Now, when we talk about funding, some of the financial products that are available in, and I'm going to say it, global north, are not available in the global south, right? I mean, some things that look normal. For example, you can't get a reverse mortgage in Trinidad and Tobago. No bank officer knows what that is. They've heard about it on TV, but nobody knows what it is, right? So some instruments are not available, and so they need to be created. Some models, I should say, are not available and need to be created. Even the concepts mean something different, because I suspect when you say collateral and we say collateral, it may well be a different concept. And so the answer is yes, that we need to, because that's what this whole talk is about. It's about reimagining what we actually see. Is what I'm seeing, and is that the only thing it could be? And I think, yes, we definitely need education and training in reimagining financial products, reimagining things like collateral and funding, so that we have an easier access to these resources.
Thanks.
Can I make a comment on that, Margaret, if it's okay? I think the concept of leveraging power in the margins in the context of the financial system is actually quite, I think it's really an important conversation, because most of the financial systems worldwide have been created from the perspective of the colonizers, unfortunately. So I once heard a very powerful intervention by, I don't remember which island state it was, but he was basically making the argument that regardless of the international funding and development funding that's coming into small island states and least developed countries, regardless of all of that, the system doesn't allow access. And the conversations about how systemically unjust the financial system isn't on the table enough. So we don't have conversations. We have conversations about the quantum. We have conversations about, we have conversations that is targeted on the general way of doing business, and then we're trying to build something new on that system. It's how Margaret and I first came across each other in the future, the FLVS. I don't remember what it all stands for, Margaret, but the conference. And I think that is also something to sort of call out, because I think the work that Future Law is doing is really important around trying to shake up the future that the law system needs to look like. But the future of the financial system, even in the conversations about climate change, about the SDGs, about justice, just transitions, responding to loss and damage in the small island states, is all from the perspective and embedded in the narrative of the global north, unfortunately. So then they say you don't have systems that are adequate enough. Then they create processes to try and make, from their perspective, what they think the system should be, and then that closes out finance. Or as in the case of what the Maldives minister once said to the Green Climate Fund was, you're always talking about evidence base. You want us to prove evidence. Why don't you just fly over when we're in the middle of a tsunami or a hurricane or something? You'll have your evidence. What scientific freaking evidence do you want? So he was so beautifully pragmatic. And I think that there's so much stalling tactics in the financial system in a way that is so unjust. It breaks the heart, honestly. And in South Africa, we're having conversations now about a just transition to move towards clean energy. But nobody wants to have the conversation that we're an unjust community. Nelson Mandela's dream of 94 and the foundations that he laid. And there's some criticisms, a lot of criticisms about being too nice. He opened up the space too much. We didn't disrupt the financial flows enough. Now we're trying to build up something, something about on the environmental side on top of an unjust system. And we all just forget and are quiet about that box that we're actually trying to fit in a new agenda into. So I think the idea of driving change is so important. And the part, so that comment I was sharing earlier, it was as much as it was such a shock to me as a woman, it was on a level of just a change fighter, maybe if there's such a word. It was absolutely expected, because in some ways, and my own spiritual teacher and background has given me a sense that you have to really appreciate where the other is coming from. They've been trained in particular schools of thought. They've had, particular education systems, social systems. They couldn't think of anything different because their background doesn't come from a place necessarily of being able to think different and bring a different solution to the table. So there's a lot of patience involved as well. And you almost have to teach, and be kind and try and bring people along. And some are not going to be brought along, but you might just find one crack.
Right.
And that's all you might need. You just need one crack, one small little breakthrough.
And it is somehow even difficult to convince people who are the victims of the banking colonial empire that they are victims. It's not always obvious because it is so embedded into almost the DNA of all the systems. It's this inequality, this unfairness that people have taken it for the only way to do business. You only have to look at Haiti to be reminded about the unfairness of colonialism and its legacy. I mean, when Haiti struck out on its own, its treasury was taken, its entire treasury. Haiti is still paying loans related to becoming independent. I mean, what the hell is that? That is, so we are in 2021 and Haiti is paying France for no longer being a slave to France. And we are in a modern world and this is acceptable, this cannot be acceptable. But Haiti is an obvious example. But as you know, the legacy of colonialism, the biggest legacy of colonialism is to convince the colonials that they were left with something better than what they had before. And many colonials believe that colonialism brought with it an advantage. I had the opportunity to listen to Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves about 2 years ago speak on the issue of colonialism. And he says, you know what I will give credit to colonialism for, that they gave us English. Beyond that, I give them no credit at all. And I agree with the approach because it is very important not to feel beholden to somebody who has stolen your existence and supplanted it with one that they have also moved on from, but you're still stuck with. My example of that is the whole homosexuality debate. And I raise it not to advance it or to offend, but to simply point out that at the height of colonialism, homosexuality was, some of the most deviant behaviors that you could have, been involved in with very, very harsh penalties in the United Kingdom. And those penalties and the attitude, the Victorian attitude around homosexuality was gifted to the colonies. And then guess what? The UK moved on and they moved their power on this issue to tipping the scales of justice on this issue and removed it from criminality and from immorality. But the colonies are still stuck with it. The colonies are still dealing with that initial gift that Britain itself has rubbished. So how do you extricate yourself from these gifts and recognize that quite a number of them are poison pills?
Thank you, Christlyn. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And guys, I'm looking at the time, so we're going to have to wrap up. Does anyone have any final questions? If not, say that really quickly. Let's close up. You see that last discourse, that last exchange between Anya, Chris, Chantal, it points to, the whole reason depth of future law, right? That this inequality, that we are experiencing all over the world is not just a symptom of development. There are narratives that have been enshrined in law that keep certain countries poor. And I see Monsieur has put, Jason Hilkel's work there, that keep certain countries poor. If we're talking about financing and the new financial models that we want to incorporate, the global economic system is built on rules and policies left in colonies and now integrated into international trade agreements, treaties, and conventions that have to be reconsidered if it is we want to have a fair system for us to get a just future. That's why a just future without considering what are the laws that are contributing to the realities that we're experiencing, can't work. And we are hoping that these kinds of discussions can stimulate those of us who are in the room who have particular areas of expertise, because one person cannot come up with all of the laws that would be the right set of laws that are going to help us to have a fairer and more just future. But it's the experts in all of the different niches. So Chantal, in terms of finance, and Chantal, we have a lot more to discuss because you have such a lot of knowledge to share on this issue on the global financial system that I would love for you to facilitate a masterclass maybe in 2022 about the system, because we have to identify those areas that are leverage points for change, so just plugging in onto that last discussion. Chris, I just want to thank you on behalf of Future Law, Annie and I, and those who are still present in the masterclass right now, and those who came in and left before. This has been incredible. It has been massively stimulating. And I am seeing I have received a lot of insights from your knowledge and from the wisdom that you've developed based on all that you've gone through and the trajectory that you've taken. And I'm really uber proud of you, and uber proud to be able to share you with the little community that we are building here of incredible professionals who are trying to find their ways of creating system change. But we also are trying, as most of you, and we're trying to point to, we're also trying to find a common language, a common language about what is just, and what is power, and what is, justice. And we're not going to clash on that today. We're going to close saying that I think that there's a way that we can do it, and that there is an emerging universality that we can integrate with. So that, but if anybody else wants to say thanks to Chris, before we go, feel free. Love you, Chris. Thank you so much. And we shared links. Sorry, housekeeping now. We shared links, how you can get onto Chris, how you can get onto her website and learn more about her. But Chris is with us, so we will be talking to Chris some more about stuff that she can do with our community going forward as well. We're not letting Chris go. This has been incredible and tremendous. And so that's that. I do also want to leave a feedback form here. Please fill out our feedback form for all our masterclasses. We know that you do. Annie, am I forgetting everything else? Join Future Law. Join Future Law. Let me send the link. And because you all have come to this masterclass, those who come to the masterclasses, and you put the link, those who've come, because I don't have it open, those who actually turn up for the masterclasses, we are giving you a free in Future Law. So with a code, and you get all of the over 100 and something hours of now content we've been creating over the last year. So the code is FLE 2021 VIP. Anya, can you, is that the code?
Yes, it's FLC.
No, the code. The code
for
the code for them to be able to join for free.
FLC 2021 VIP.
VIP.
Let me double check. that.
Or it could be FLs. I know, I'm sorry, guys. I should have right. Or it could be that. One of those two, put in that code when they say discount or whatever. You go through, you don't have to put in your credit card information. Just put in that code and then you get access to all the back stuff and these recordings as well. Okay, because some people may pay just for the recordings, but because you've turned up and we love you, we are giving you free access to everything. And we're doing that for a period of time, trying to build the community and see how it goes. In 2022, we'll see, maybe you all could come and help us make decisions and Chris could help us make decisions about sustainability. But right now we've moved to freedom, right? It's trying to be as free as possible for the moment. Lots of love, guys. Lots of love.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you very much. All the
Yeah.
best.
Love you, Chris. Bye.
Love you guys. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Chantal.
And you too.
She's
Badass.
incredible. We have incredible people. And Keith, Scott, Bernicia, and Hayden, quiet as a. We didn't hear anything from you all, huh? Keith, Hayden, Bernicia. I know Keith Scott. I know Keith Scott. Huh?
What you want to hear from me?
What happened? Why we can't hear
I
from
don't
you?
want to hear from me, though. My wife adores Christlyn. Badass is an understatement. As far as my wife concerned.
Isn't it? Good to see you, man. I haven't seen you in a long time.
Same here, same here. I've been here working and listening.
Okay. All right. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Hey, okay, Hayden. Hayden and Renisha don't want to say hi, so. Then,
Hi, you didn't hear.
I didn't hear.
Yes,
Hi.
sir.
Okay. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for plugging in.
Yeah, it was fun.
Okay. All right. Bye, guys. Lots of love.
Okay.